Today I would like to discuss with you about a young boy whose life ended far too soon at the hands of evil men rooted in prejudice and hate. Emmett Lewis Till, born July 25th, 1941, and passed August 28th, 1951, in the state of Mississippi. Till was a boy from Chicago, visiting his family down south when he crossed paths with one Carolyn Bryant. Now 14-year-old Emmett was an African-American child who supposedly flirted with the 21-year-old white woman in the local grocery store. The events that followed after the two encountered each other that day, regardless of what interactions they had, was completely undeserving and absolute cruelty. Being a victim of lynching, defined by dictionary.com as to put to death, especially by hanging, by mob action, and without legal authority. Till's death became the face for the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and reasonably so. Reports from the Dwight D. Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum says that Till's body was bloated and mutilated beyond recognition from severe blunt force trauma. Bryant's husband, Roy Bryant, and his half-brother, J.W. Milam, took Emmett away from the child's family's house by gunpoint. And after the abduction, it is not clear what exactly was done to the child. However, the reports state that he was beaten, mutilated, and then shot in the head. After killing the child, the two men weighed his body down and tossed him into the Tallahatchie River. Authorities looked for Emmett's body in the river for 3 days before finally finding him. In videos found on YouTube of Emmett's mother, Mammy Till, she speaks of how well educated and mannerly the boy was. At the age of 10, Emmett was smart enough to make his way around downtown Chicago and pay the bills of the house all by himself. Mammy mentions that Emmett had contracted polio when he was 5 years old, which left him with a terrible stutter, as she describes. After exhausting efforts to try to find her child help, Mammy suggested whistling before saying the word in order to pronounce the word with clarity and confidence. What really happened in the store that day rests with the individuals that is there. Mammy suggests that Emmett was whistling to build up courage to ask the clerk for bubble gum, and it was misconstrued as catcalling the woman, which was against the Jim Crow's laws of the South for how a person of color was supposed to have conducted themselves around a white woman. And many African-American males lost their lives to similar interactions with white women in the South. However, this incident strikes my interest because of how the efforts that Mammy showed to aid her child to no longer have the stutter. Was Emmett just working up nerve that day? Later in Mammy's interview, she speaks of Carolyn Bryant's testimony on the stand, saying that young Emmett had not only whistled but grabbed her, which was stricken from the record because the judge seen that it was a facade. Unfortunately, though, the two murderous men was acquitted of all charges and found not guilty. Mammy stated that she miraculously did not faint or fall to pieces when she seen the unspeakable state that her son was in, but rather was strengthened by it. She felt the need to let the people know and insisted on an open casket viewing so that way the world could see what they had done to her boy. In the interview, it is said that around 60,000 people showed to view his body, and that 1 out of every 5 persons that viewed Emmett had to have assistance away from the casket because they couldn't handle looking at the aftermath of such brutality. She also allowed Jet magazine to take pictures of her son's body for more publication of the matter, which sparked controversy everywhere and even reached the ears of Rosa Parks herself. After the local mortician had done his best to make Emmett presentable, Mammy stated that when she viewed her son originally, along with the swelling and lacerations, Emmett's tongue had been forced out of his mouth because of the barbed wire wrapped around his neck and was used to tie him to the object that weighed the boy down in the river, along with half of his face hanging off from a hatchet wound that was later sewed together before the funeral. Personally, I do not understand how we could have ever lived with such hate in our nation. I do not understand how two men, fathers themselves, could bring themselves to commit such atrocities. Furthermore, it astounds and depresses me to know that justice was never served to these men who had earned more than capital punishment. They walked free. The judicial system failed Emmett and Mamie Till on September 23, 1955, when the verdict came down not guilty. The reason I chose to inform the class of this case was because I have not heard about Emmett until recently, and after looking into the case for my own personal interest, I seen an opportunity to share his story with others that have never known him. Cases like Emmett's are the reasons we need to learn about what our society was like not long ago, so that way we can move forward into a more united U.S. This country has come a long way, but it has so much further to go. Reflecting on the past, we can make sure that events like this will never happen again. And if it does, then that means the judicial system can provide justice for the victims.